Christ is risen.
The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.
We are all shocked in this parish by the wanton vandalism that was perpetrated on St. Mary's Church, Askeaton on Easter weekend. From the many messages of support and the responses that have poured in from so many people and so many places, I know that shock is shared way beyond this parish, way beyond this diocese and this land. We arrived in St. Mary's Church on Easter morning expecting to celebrate the rock being rolled away from the tomb and to celebrate the resurrection. Instead, we found a rock had been thrown through the window of the south side of the chancel area. The bottom part of the stained glass was shattered and a forced entry had been attempted. Shards of glass were strewn everywhere. The cross, draped in white as a sign of the resurrection, had been knocked over. Easter Day is the most sacred day in the Christian calendar. It is a day of triumph and victory, a day when the risen Christ proclaims, "Peace be with you, be not afraid." But instead, we found the church had been attacked for a second time. Parishioners were quick to come and to clean up, to express their shock, to secure the window and to board up the building. This is not only damage to a window and a building. It is an assault at Easter on all that is sacred. Our neighbour, Father Sean O'Lungy, says this is both disturbing and disgraceful, not to mention the sad irony of it happening on Easter morning. Local politicians have united in calling it sacrilegious. But this is also an attack on the whole community in Askeaton. Already the local GAA club has been vandalised in recent weeks. If the perpetrators are not confronted, who is the next target for these vandals? Shopfronts? Business premises? Family homes? It seems nothing is sacred to them. The sharing of shock and torment by the wider community is uplifting and encouraging. We must stand with one another at times such as this. All our readings on this Sunday, the second Sunday of Easter, teach us how important it is for us not to fear, to be at peace, and for communities to share. In the first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, we are told that the whole group of those who believed are of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common. This is not some political agenda or social engineering. It is because they are Easter people, because they share the grace of God through faith in the resurrection. In the alternative reading from the prophet Isaiah, the people are told, because you plural, because you are precious in my sight and honored, and I love you, do not fear, for I am with you. In the Psalm 133, we are reminded how good and pleasant it is to dwell together in unity. The early church lives by sharing, in giving and in receiving. In our gospel reading, we are reminded how the risen Christ came and stood among the disciples, breaking down all their barriers of fear. On 3 occasions, he tells them, "Peace be with you." When he breathes on them, he shares with them the gift of the Holy Spirit. We must live without fear, in peace and in the power of the Holy Spirit. We must share, and we must look forward to the future for this parish, for the church. We must have reason to hope for, to want our church doors to open again when the pandemic restrictions end. In these COVID lockdown times, when many people are locked away in their rooms in fear, how does the church replace those fears with the peace that Christ wants us to share in? as we wait behind closed doors for our churches to reopen? What is our vision for the church when those doors open once again? First, I think it is imperative that the church shares fearlessly in the suffering of people today. We ought not be pleading a special case for the church. It would be selfish to try to argue that opening our church doors is more important than grandparents seeing their grandchildren, than the jobs of people in the hospitality industry, or so many other sections of the economy, than the desire or needs of people to have a proper holiday. Secondly, sharing is caring. Wearing face masks, accepting cheerfully the present restrictions, not organising church events that quickly become super spreader occasions. That phone call, text, offer to shop, all are signs of the church, that the church both shares and cares. I'm moved by the way English cathedrals, including Lichfield Cathedral, have been key centres for rolling out the vaccine programme in England. Sacred spaces must be life-affirming, life-giving, hope-giving. And thirdly, Christ came that they may have life and have it abundantly. His death and resurrection are not just for me individually, for you individually, but for all, that they may have life, not just a mere existence, but a life without fear, a life filled with love, a life that is lived to the full. We share now. We care now because the church must be Christ-like, like the risen Christ. Christ is risen.